Hey guys, welcome back to another episode of the Tom Wang Show. I was away on my travels for the past couple months, went to Asia and everything, and it was great. Now I'm back, ready to work and ready to have more, giving you guys more content as well. On this episode, I interviewed my friend Anya. I recently met her, and what an absolute inspirational and motivational story. She actually suffered from panic attacks for a big part of her 20s actually, but then she turned her greatest pain into the greatest gift because she was able to find some solutions and cures, and she was able to actually provide a better solution for the marketplace in a form of an app called Rooted. Since then, she's had over 2 million downloads. She has over 6 figures in active subscribers. So in this interview, I asked her about her journey as an entrepreneur, how she started with an app, how she bootstrapped her entire business with no investors, how she got her first 100 paying customers, and ultimately how she grew this brand into a 2 million download app. Very inspiring, a lot of great lessons, both business and in life. Hopefully you guys enjoyed this episode. Let me know what you think, and enjoy this episode of the Tom Wang Show. All right. Anya, thank you for coming.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Of course. We met a couple months ago at a party, and it was funny because my friend Tony was like, oh, like, me and my friend Anya there. I was like, I don't know what she looks like. Like, how do I know who she looks like? And then we started talking, and I heard you from actually My First Billion. And Sam Parra was just raving about you. And then I connected the dots. I was like, oh, that's you. That's so interesting. So thanks for coming. But yeah, today I just want to kind of go over like how you build your business, a little bit about your background. I'm always super interested in knowing the stories of founders and entrepreneurs, like what got them to do what they do today. As well as just like your, I guess, like general philosophies and mindset on life. I find that very interesting as well. Everybody thinks very differently, and I think we're all shaped by the events that happened to us like in an earlier chapter. So we'll just chat and see how the conversation flows. But yeah, why don't you just like quickly introduce yourself? Yeah.
Sure. Yeah. So my name is Anya. I am the founder of Rooted, which is an app for anxiety and panic attack relief that I started 5 years ago now. And yeah, we just hit the 2.7 million download mark, and
Wow.
over 50,000 user reviews at a 4.8 rating. So yeah, that's like what I spend my time on.
Nice. So you started this 5 years ago, and let me ask you this. If you were like a 5-year-old self today, would you ever get, like, were you just an entrepreneur ever since you were a kid? Or did you know you were going to do some sort of business or entrepreneurship or?
Yeah, I think growing up, I always wanted to have like some sort of impact in that, but I didn't have like a understanding of how I would do that. I thought maybe I'd work for the UN or some sort of organization like that. So that part I knew I wanted to do, but then the business side, I was also always just hustling a little, as a kid. I guess my first sort of venture was drawing these paintings, and then I would sell them to my family. But then I was like, wait, I could make so much more and work so much less if I just drew the painting and charged them to look at it.
What do you mean?
Like I would, draw something and then charge you like 10 cents to look at it.
Oh, interesting.
And then I can, yeah.
Oh, wow.
Keep the painting and use the same one and charge everybody 10 cents. And I was just like, that was like my 9-year-old brain. Yeah.
Interesting. What other side hustles have you had, like when you were little kid?
Always had a ton, like dog walking, babysitting. Once I lived in Korea for a while, so I taught English. Yeah, I was always just had multiple jobs.
Where do you think that entrepreneurial drive came from?
I think a part of it is, growing up and seeing that they're just, didn't grow up in a super privileged family. So just seeing that there was always like something I wanted that I couldn't have, or like I didn't get an allowance and stuff like that. So that was a part of it. But I think there's that inner drive that entrepreneurs have that like we're just born with. I don't really know what it is, but just like a drive to just want more. Yeah.
Interesting. So I remember you told me that when you were a kid, you lived in Korea. So were you born in Korea or were you born?
No, I was born in Canada.
Okay.
I just did high school in Korea.
And what was that like?
Yeah, it was very different, right? But the ages that I was there for, I was like 12 to 17. So like pretty formative years. So I really quickly adapted to it. Because that's just, at that age, you can really adapt to anything.
Yeah, that's true. I came from China to Canada at the age of 10. So when I came here, I basically just like forgot everything that happened in China. And then I just became very immersed with the Western culture. My best friend was like this kid from England. And yeah, I just became very adaptive. So I know exactly what you mean by that.
Totally, yeah.
Did you have any like identity issues though? Like,
For sure. Yeah, growing up, I was always, my family's background is Polish, so I was always too Polish to like fit in with like the Canadians that kind of grew up here. Their families were Canadians. And then in Poland, I was too Canadian to be Polish. And then in Korea, I actually adapted to the extent that I like spoke Korean fluently. And like all my friends were Korean. And yet I still wasn't Korean.
Right.
So yeah, that was a constant struggle for me. And I think a constant like sense of loneliness, to be honest. Yeah.
Interesting. Yeah, I find it super interesting that when you ask like a Japanese person, like when you see a Japanese person, you call them Japanese, but then you see like a white person who lives in Japan, you would never call them like Japanese. But I think in Canada, it's very different. Like I kind of consider myself Canadian. Like you don't have to be white to be Canadian. You know what I mean? So there is that kind of culture difference that I find interesting. Yeah, I actually want to kind of dive a little bit deeper on your side hustles. Like were your parents entrepreneur? Like you must have gotten that from somewhere. Like, can you recall a moment where you're just like, I gotta make it myself in this world. Like I can't just rely on a 9-to-5 job. And
Yeah, I mean, my mom always worked so hard. She did have multiple jobs, not necessarily a business though. So I'm not sure where that part came from, but I think I need to rely on myself did come pretty early in my life. Like I mentioned, just, wanting to do things that I couldn't afford to. That was like a drive.
Right.
To be able to do that.
Right. And what were some of those things? Do you recall?
Like travel or going out with my friends, just basic things that I was just like, okay, I just need to get this side job to be able to do that. Or sometimes even school field trips and stuff too. If there's like an added cost. But yeah, my mom was super, super supportive, but just can't afford everything. So I just had to go out and kind of figure out the extra jobs during school. And but my family, I never met them, but my great grandparents I know were very entrepreneurial. They had stores, and they, I think in Poland during like from the 60s to the 80s, I think so many people were entrepreneurial because if you wanted anything different or more than what your neighbor had, like you have to like hustle for it.
Right. Interesting. Okay, so from 12 to 17, you were in Korea, and I guess that's like high school, right?
Yeah.
Okay. And
last year of middle school and high school. Yeah.
Gotcha. Yeah. And so what happened after the age of 17? Did you move back to Canada or you went somewhere else?
I did. I went to UBC in Vancouver.
Cool.
And then I lived up in northern Canada for a year. And then my mom at the time was in Malaysia and Thailand throughout the years. So I would like go there for my summer breaks from UBC. So I'd spend months and months there. And then I also did like a term in Guatemala, a term abroad, which was awesome. And I think also super formative. And those friendships that I made there, I'm friends with today. Like I think because we all went through that together.
Yeah, like sharing similar experiences.
Culture shock and then learning how to live somewhere so different again. But we did it all together. That was really cool.
Right. Yeah. And what'd you study in UBC?
I studied international relations.
Okay.
So with the idea that, maybe be working in the UN or be a diplomat one day, something like that.
Interesting.
Yeah.
And that stems from the fact that you said you want to make an impact, you want to make a difference.
Yes.
So as the younger self, you thought like going into the government or whatever, I can make an impact, I can make a difference.
Totally.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
So what happened after university? So you got your diploma, you got your degree, you got your, certifications and everything you need. So did you start applying for jobs in that field or?
I did not because I had a panic attack.
Oh, wow.
And it was pretty out of nowhere. And it was super confusing for me. I still had student loans and didn't have a family doctor. And it was just a really confusing time. And I went from loving public speaking and being like the volunteer who wanted to do it to just dreading it and being unable to do a lot of the things and the skills that I believed that a job would require.
Right.
Like a job in that sector would require.
Right.
And then around the same time, I was discovering just graphic design and illustration, teaching myself CSS and HTML and building websites.
Interesting. And that panic attack, you now that you understand, obviously, I would assume you're like an expert level at anxiety and panic attacks now. Looking back, do you understand what happened? Is there a better story about that now? Or because at the time we're just like, whoa, like what the fuck is this? Like what's going on?
Yeah. So one of the theories is that, there's some trauma that I had from high school that I never really dealt with because I was always so busy. Like going to school, I had multiple jobs. During the summer break, I would always take extra courses or keep working throughout the summer. And I got the panic attack the first time where I didn't have anything. Where you think I should be celebrating and relaxing. Instead, I got a panic attack. So the theory there is that I was just like almost putting off that pain because I was so busy on, just try to make a life for myself despite what happened. Yeah.
That's so interesting. Yeah. I recently shared, it's really interesting that when nothing goes on in your life, isn't it? Like when everything is perfect, when it's almost too perfect and you don't have to like grind and keep yourself busy because a lot of those are distractions. And when there are no more distractions, because when you're like, I call it in the battlefield, right? We're in the battlefield. And when you're like going to war or whatever, there's no time for, like, how am I feeling today? It's like you're just fueled off of adrenaline. Every single day you get up, you know exactly what needs to be done that day.
Totally.
I gotta work 3 jobs. I gotta go, oh my God, like after this, I don't have time to eat. I gotta like pack up my bag, go to my next shift. At the end of the day, you're so exhausted. You come home, you sleep. Next day, it's the exact same thing. And then when all that is kind of like over, it's like you just have a lot of time to think now. And those questions that come up to your head, you're like, wow, I don't know the answers to these questions.
Totally.
So regarding that trauma, share as much that you're comfortable with. I don't, I never want to press someone and like, like tell us your trauma to the world. Like, is it like physical, emotional with your parents or classmates, or can you share anything about that, or you prefer not to? I want to respect whatever.
Yeah, I'll just share that it was an event. So it wasn't,
Gotcha.
It was like with an external person, an event. Yeah.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
And you just like decided to put it off and.
Yeah, I mean, I was so young too that it's, we didn't really grow. I think now kids are growing up being taught how to like deal with stuff like that a bit better than when I was growing up. I just stayed busy.
Yeah. No, I hear you. So after the panic attack,
yes,
you didn't want to do any of the things that you thought you were going to do. So you decided.
I could.
No, okay.
Yeah, it was really bad. Like my world was just getting smaller and smaller because I was getting these panic attacks frequently.
Oh, so you started getting them more after.
Yeah.
Wow. And then you decided to basically stay in to do some more, just like you with your computer, so that you're not out in the public and stuff like that.
Exactly. You got it.
Gotcha.
Yeah. It was a way to not have to interact with people.
Interesting.
And I've always loved design and art, and I grew up drawing and painting, so it was about like learning how to do that on the computer. Yeah.
Interesting. I can kind of relate to what you said about the panic attack. I remember my first panic attack was actually on New Year's Eve back in, it must have been like more than 7 years ago. So it was New Year's Eve. We were supposed to go to a party and it was around 7 p.m. I was starving. I didn't eat all day. And me and my Christina, my wife, but my girlfriend at the time, Christina, we decided to go to Pizza Hut in Richmond on number 3 road there. And I was stuffing myself with I was so hungry. And I was like just biting so many, I was like stuffing myself. I have a very bad habit of like not chewing, just like putting a lot of food in my mouth and just swallowing. And I remember coming home and I was like, oh my God, I'm so full. And all of a sudden I felt like I had trouble breathing. And I started getting really hot. And I started seeing like tunnel vision. Like my peripheral vision was like literally shutting off. Like I can't see out of the corner of my eye. And then I started having trouble breathing and I went to the washroom. I thought I was getting like, I thought I was choking up from the pizza. So I started going to a sink and I just started yakking. Like I was like, I gotta puke it out. There's something that's blocking me. That's why I can't breathe. And then I was like, Christina, I need to go to the hospital. Like, what the fuck's going on? And then she's like, okay, like, I don't know what's going on. I started driving to the hospital. And then I went to the hospital and then I just sat there, emergency room, Canadian healthcare is, sat there for like 2 hours. And then at that time I was feeling better. And then I went to the doctor. I was like, yeah, this is what happened. They're like, dude, you're perfectly healthy. I think you had a panic attack. And I was like, what? I was like, I don't get like, what do you mean I have a panic attack? There's no way I get a panic attack. That's like only for someone else to have, right? Not me.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, totally. I used to think that panic attacks were just people are too stressed out.
Yeah.
They need to chill. It's like, no, it's actually so much more difficult than that.
Yeah.
And I couldn't relate as well when a friend of mine was flying to see me and visit me in Malaysia when I was with my mom. And she was so scared of flying. And I just like was just trying to rationalize it to her and like support her. But to be honest, I couldn't understand it. And then I apologized afterwards once I had a panic attack. I was like, yeah, I'm afraid of like everything now. And I get how horrible this feels. So I'm sorry I didn't understand it then.
Can you imagine having a panic attack when you're on an airplane too? Like
people do.
I know.
It's a thing.
I have a friend that has panic. She's much better now.
Yeah.
Before she takes planes, she has to just like take so much medicine, whatever.
Yeah.
But I was like, dude, that's the worst place. One of the worst places to have a panic attack. Because there's no way for you to escape from that either. Her panic attack was so bad on an airplane one time that they actually had to like, the plane couldn't take off.
Right.
She had to get like escorted out of the airplane. That's how terrible it is. But she's doing much better now.
Really hard. Yeah, I'm glad she's doing better, and she's flying.
She's flying.
That would be like hard to go back to after such a dramatic event.
Yeah, she's in like Asia right now by herself, like on these like leaving like little planes. I'm like, dude, you come a long way.
Crushing it.
Good for you.
Yeah.
So so let's go back to the timeline. So you had this panic attack. You started getting more frequently. And by the way, now that I'm talking to you, I remember one thing that this doctor told me that I really think she shouldn't have. Maybe I'm sure she was just doing her job. She said one thing to me that I just remember now. She's like, oh, you had a panic attack? You're going to get them more frequently now. I don't think that was very helpful, to be honest. Because now I'm like, oh, shit. Okay. When's the next one?
Exactly. Yeah. And there is research done on like how your experience with your first panic attack can affect your healing process so much. Because some people are fortunate that they're around friends or family and they just feel okay quickly.
Right.
Others, like me and you, end up in the emergency room super confused and not without like a good explanation even from a doctor.
Right.
I had the same situation where the doctor was like, no, it was a panic attack. You're okay. And I was like, what do you mean I'm okay? Like, I just thought I was dying. Like, that was horrible. And then, you know, he has to go because it's like a busy emergency room. And then you're just and it's just like, what do I do now? And yeah, it's just like it's a really challenging experience.
Right. And I think during that time, I'm sure we were younger at the time as well, but times have also changed. I think there's a lot more open conversations now about anxiety and stress and what it can do for you. There's a lot of good books that are published. And now people are starting to realize, dude, like stress is a silent killer. It's like smoking, right? So we can go back to that. But in terms of going back to the timeline wise, so you started getting more frequent panic attacks. You started teaching yourself web design, graphic design, CSS, and all these different things. So what happened after that?
Well, I should mention that I was so desperate for resources about anxiety and panic attacks because, again, I just didn't know anything and I was just sort of sent home. And I ended up looking for, an app, and it didn't exist. There's like nothing on panic attacks, and those that were there were like hypnosis apps, and I was like, oh, this is not making me feel good. This is like really weird. And I was just so on edge. Like everything made me so anxious. It was a really bad cycle. Yeah, I ended up finding like some research done on it and like reading about it in the library more so. Like there just wasn't many tools or resources online.
So you really wanted to solve your panic attack.
Oh, for sure.
To go to the library to like look for books on this topic.
Yeah.
And did that make everything worse?
No, it helped because there was like one doctor who started working on it. It was Dr. Claire Weeks. And she was like the first person, at least published, I believe, to say that, hey, these are treatable. And so she had a sort of, theories that are closely related to like cognitive behavioral therapy on how to deal with it. And so that actually provided me a ton of hope and so much relief. And I just wish that I had found that sooner. So I ended up carrying, these articles and these books around with me because I just felt like more comforted by them.
Gotcha.
Like knowing that. And in the moment that I would
like you will physically carry these books around you?
Physically carry books.
Wow.
For years.
Wow.
And then I was like, oh, this should really be in an app because I have my phone on me all the time. And I'm like, trying to like live life again. And I'm carrying all these books with me. Yeah. It wasn't, it's what I needed to do. It's not the end of the world to have to carry books. But I was like, this is just, weird.
So what if you like went out one night? At that time, did you have a social life still? Or like
No, not really. Not really, no. I actually even had to cut off some relationships and friendships and stuff. It was, overall a very challenging time.
Wow.
But yes, to answer your question, I did carry around books with me even if I would go out.
Wow.
Which, yeah.
And it's so interesting that we as human beings would assign a meaning to an object like a book so that we can actually feel more comfortable when we are in a situation that we needed help. It's like,
Right.
oh, this is like, this will save me. But it's like, it's a book. It's not gonna save you, but like we assign that meaning to it.
Well, the contents of the book was really helpful, right? So if I felt super stressed out, I would pull out the book and like reread
Oh, okay.
the stuff that was calming me.
Oh, okay. Gotcha. I thought you were just like carrying a book around and then.
No.
Gotcha.
No.
Interesting.
Yeah, but that information again could have been, elsewhere, and that's sort of what led me to start Rooted.
Interesting.
Yeah.
So during that time, there was no apps.
No, there's like a really wonky. I wish I took screenshots now because I am asked this question a lot, and I can like picture them. So there's like this hypnosis app, and then there was this app that was like very medical in nature that was not helpful. Like the language, the way it was describing things, it was just not very. It just
Like
didn't
user
speak
friendly.
to me.
Yeah. It was like more like medical research almost, right? So during that time, you found a couple of like, we'll call them competitors, but available solutions in the market, and you were just like, this is not like what I'm looking for
At all. Yeah.
So you had this, and that's when you had this idea of like, hey, what if I put everything in an app format?
Yes,
Okay.
exactly. And I was drawing these designs like just in my journals and kind of creating the app mascot that would become Ron, who's the app mascot today. And I just had all these variations of him. And I was doing like graphic design work for clients. And then every now and then I'd just spend time and like zone out on like just brainstorming and picturing what an app could look like and creating the monster and also the path in the app. Because I was so sensitive to the types of content that I was consuming, because I was in such like a anxious state that I was just like hyper aware of like the experience that I wanted and needed.
Right. Okay, so you basically decided to just started, I guess, started your master plan really on a piece of paper while you were still working with. Yeah. So at that time you were like graphic designer, just like freelancing.
Yeah.
Gotcha. So tell me about the moment that you decided to, all right, like I assume that you drew everything out. You're like, what now? Like, what's the next step? So what's the next step after that?
Yeah, so it was when I was finally starting to feel better, because then I had that content like really validated. Like I had my own sort of rooted on paper, and I would start carrying around my journals, actually. And it was at that moment that I was like, this needs to exist. And I went to an app development agency, told them my idea. How do I figure out the different steps that go into making an app? How do I do as much as I can? Like as a non-technical founder, I mean, I can make websites and code a little bit, but definitely not like mobile app development. And there's so much more to an app, right? Than the development too. You need the content and the design and wireframes and all. So actually I started teaching myself the wireframing because I basically asked the agency to break down like that bill and like what goes into what.
Right.
And I was like, okay, if, X thousand are for wireframing, like what is wireframing? Just go home and Google like what is wireframing and then figure out how to do that.
That's awesome. That's so smart.
And then like the illustrations and the graphic design. So going from just drawing the monster in my journal to actually creating him an illustrator and then figuring out that whole process.
Was there a step of that process that you really couldn't do? Like I know you probably taught yourself a lot, but it's like, all right, like now I really need to hire someone for this particular thing.
The actual mobile development.
Gotcha.
Yeah. Like I downloaded like Xcode and Android Studio and I was like, no.
Yeah.
This is where I need help. And so I actually worked with a student as the first contractor. I think he was still in school. He was like doing a co-op and he had just heard me talk about it so much that one day he came up to me like, hey, are you still working on that thing? And I'm like, yeah, for sure. Like super fired up and stoked. And then he was like, yeah, I'd like to help out. Like I've worked on other co-ops, but nothing that was really like impactful. So I was like, yeah, let's do it. And we got the first version out. It was definitely like buggy and had
version 1. Typical,
yeah, exactly. But I did decide to just launch it without like a ton of tests. Like it wasn't a super classic business story where I did a market survey and really closely looked at competitors. I was just like so fired up about this idea that this needed to exist that I didn't do any sort of like stuff that they would probably teach you in an MBA.
Yeah, I was going to ask you about that. Just like, did you validate this? It seems like you were just like, this needs to exist.
Yes.
And you just went for it.
Yeah, I did. Once I had the content and the designs, I did go to a clinical therapist and have them read through it, approve it, because I didn't want to publish anything that wasn't approved. But other than that, like, yeah, it was just like, this needs to exist. This finally helped me. I've been suffering for so many years too. So I really had this sense of like, what a waste of my 20s, like of dealing with panic attack after panic attack and my world getting smaller and smaller.
Wow.
And I was just so fed up too that I was like, this just needs to, maybe even if it'll just help like a few people.
Right.
Yeah.
And there's such a powerful quote that's like, and I think you're a perfect illustration of that, is your greatest pain is also your greatest gift.
Yeah. I'd say some people ask me if I am like okay with the fact that I had panic attacks because it led to Rooted. And I still don't know. Like my instinct, like those were really horrible years, but I see where you're coming from too. Like, yeah.
But you turned, like, we can't go back and change things.
Yes, exactly.
But whatever happened to you during that time, you turned that into a gift now to the world.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, okay. So you had this version 1, it was buggy as hell. And then you had this student, I guess he's like an intern or like a paid or how?
It was also freelance.
Freelance. Okay.
Yeah, we're all freelance and just doing this like on the side kind of thing.
Gotcha.
And yeah, the first user reviews were really validating. There's people saying, hey, this content is super helpful, but has this and this bug. Like, I really hope the developers fix it because I want to keep using this. And I was like, wow, like that's motivating to want to keep going. And because I also, like, all my personal savings went into paying the developer too. So I really did like dive in.
How did you get the first like initial users, like let's say the first 100 users, and how were they giving this feedback? Were you like asking for it, or did they just start emailing you by themselves?
There were user reviews in the app stores.
Oh, okay. Gotcha.
Yeah. Also some emails, Facebook comments, stuff like that.
Understood.
Yeah.
Okay.
But the user reviews were really what mattered because that also is the backbone of like app store optimization as well. So yeah, the first few hundred users, I published an article, like I did a press release with, I sent it to like local tech organizations because they're, when you're that small, nobody else is really going to write about you or publish. But people really like hearing local tech stories.
Yeah, totally.
So I sent that out, although I was super terrified of having my name next to it because I didn't want to be known as like the anxiety person, like because it was still so stigmatized. And I also just didn't feel comfortable like with my name associated with it, especially my photo too. I remember a few journalists asked for like a photo and I just sent them like the app mascot. I was so uncomfortable. I was like, this isn't about me. It's about Rooted.
Right.
Why do they need that? Yeah. So that, helps like with those first few hundred users, and then a ton of Facebook engagement, like engaging in comments, Instagram. This was back when Instagram had hashtags, or that was like a thing that we'd still use. So I would go into those hashtags and
like anxiety,
comment, like engagement, panic attacks. Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah.
So like very
niche.
Yeah, very niche, but very like hands-on, very like guerrilla style. Just like DMing every single person, starting a conversation. Your inbox probably had like 300 conversations at one point.
Exactly. Yeah.
Wow.
Just like every waking moment. Just like doing something that is not paid because I didn't have funds.
And I think, tactically speaking, I have like a lot of entrepreneurs that like listen to this pod. But yeah, tactically speaking, it's like at the very beginning, you got to do the things that actually don't scale. Because if, let's say you're selling, I don't know, like take my wife's product, for example, like oat milk chocolate, for example. Like one of the things, it's not so sexy. It's not like, oh, let's go on Meta and let's do UGC and let's do this, let's do that. It's like, hey, you can actually, like the cool thing about these platforms now is you can actually reach other people. And maybe not at like 1,000 people at a time, but you can reach one person at a time. So if you do go and find out your target market, what they are, what kind of hashtag you're using, and then literally DM them. So what were you DM? I'm curious to know, like, what was the opening line? Like, hey, I got this app, check it out, or?
No, like helpful tips, actually.
Yeah. Okay,
so
cool.
Rather than just promoting Rooted, I would actually like respond to people's comments. And like people are having a hard time, so I didn't want to just be like, use this. But I want to be like, hey, here's something that might help. Here's a tip. And then like they'll also see it's coming from the Rooted account, and then they go and they follow it. And then the feedback that I was getting was like, this helped me get through last night. Like I thought I wasn't going to make it through the night. Or, this app mascot, because the name is Ron, I'll be like, Ron is the only thing there for me. Like I'm actually feeling like I can go back to school now or go back to work. And the impact was just so huge. And those reviews were so meaningful that really helped fuel it. Some people were promoting it on their own too. They're like, this app saved my life, and saying things like that. And so it was really shocking for me, and validating, of course.
Super validating.
But I was just like, wow, okay, this is not just going to help a couple of people. This is going to help many, many people.
Interesting. So what happened after that? I wanted to go back. There was a thought in my head. Let me ask you this. I guess we'll never know the answer, but I am curious to know what you'll say. Like, let's say if you didn't get those validations. Well, I'm curious to know like what you would have done. I'm sure you would have figured some other way out, but because it was so like meaningful to you.
Exactly. Yeah. I think that I went all in with the app, like in terms of personal savings and time and everything, and mentally, regardless of knowing if there's going to be any outcome. Right. So that was like just decided already, like I'm doing this and that's it.
Yeah.
And then every other step of the way of the validation was just like a wonderful surprise almost.
Yeah. Yeah,
So,
totally.
yeah.
So, okay. So now you got like some users, you used Instagram, you give people helpful tips, and people started using Rooted. You're getting like user signups and stuff like that. So like what happened after?
Yeah. So a ton of also just creating content on Instagram and all those social platforms as well. So like the engagement as well as content creation. And so people would come for that, for quotes and such. So I focused a lot on App Store optimization as the main tactic because I didn't have, again, a budget for advertising.
Right.
So at the time, the apps that were ranking for anxiety were things like Calm or Headspace. I'm like, those are venture-backed giants. Like I'm not competing with them for that keyword. But the panic attack keyword is like super low search and low difficulty. So I decided to go after that instead.
Is there a tool that you use to find the search volume and difficulty?
A bunch.
Like for app stores specifically?
Yes.
There are tools.
Yeah.
Oh, okay, cool.
Yeah, there are.
Gotcha.
There are. Yeah. Yeah. I
So
think
it's kind of like
figures.
It's kind of like Google keywords, right? It will see like the search volume and
Exactly.
okay, cool.
Yeah. Yeah.
Cool.
And when you're like an entrepreneur and you're so fired up, you're like, of course this is for anxiety because I know it works and I'm already getting reviews. But I'm like, okay, I have to like strip my ego off a bit and just focus on something that is less volume, but it's somewhere where I think I can make more impact.
Right. And like I have a lot of Amazon sellers that follow this, and that's a exact strategy as well. Like on Amazon, there's different keywords, same as really any like search platform, but you can see the search volume for these keywords. And typically speaking, the ones with the most amount of searches are also the most competitive because everybody's trying to go for that. But then you can also attack a lot of like longer tailed keywords that have a lot less search volume. But then if you went after like 50 of them, the total search volume actually equates to the main one anyway. So
Interesting. Yeah.
Yeah. So I guess that's kind of like the same strategy that you used. And what were some, like now whenever I go on an app store, like it asks me, the little pop-up? It's like, oh, do you like us? Or are you enjoying using this app? Every single app, like freaking DoorDash is like every single order I do on DoorDash, because I don't really like leaving reviews, but it bombards me with it. Is that a strategy that you implemented? Just like keeps popping up?
But not until later on, not until I figured out that the reviews were so helpful for ASO. Like it took me a while. App Store optimization.
Gotcha.
So it's just like search engine optimization, but for the app stores.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
And so once I realized that, then we had a API put in that. So there's that pop up. And then it's just about like figuring out, okay, when do you ask? If you ask too early, people might get pissed off and leave like a worse review. But if you ask, but you might not have those users long enough until, they're using it later on. So I ended up choosing really early because I was feeling really confident. And I had it right after the first like aha moment. So like the first time you use the app and get to like a success page, whether you use it for a panic attack or you did some deep breathing or you read a lesson, you'll get like the app mascot congratulating you. And so it's like this feel good moment, and then it asks for a review.
Gotcha.
But I did, pretty early on though. So it's a bit of a risk for, if you're starting an app to decide where you want to put it.
Right.
I went for volume over, I was like not so worried about the ratings being low. So I went for volume.
Gotcha.
Basically. Yeah.
Gotcha. Makes sense. Okay, so you got this app going on now. You were always constant, like, you used to have this intern with you, by the way, or this freelancer?
I
at
worked
that time,
with
or-
like several. I think he left to go do a full-time thing, and so I found other contractors. But yeah, it's always been contractors.
Okay,
Yeah.
gotcha. And then you're always like fixing the bugs. If there's any issues, you're fixing that.
Yeah.
So for you, you're managing that side of the things. Would you say like you're spending most of your time kind of promoting the app, like creating content, like what were some of the marketing things that you did that really fueled the fire, would you say?
Yeah, so I'd say definitely social media engagement. That was like huge and very time consuming. So yeah, that did take a lot of time. The press releases I mentioned, I got into a habit of doing those really frequently. And I started being able to send them to like bigger and bigger news sites,
Right.
where they would actually be received, because at that point, we're getting to like the tens of thousands or 100,000. I actually hit 100,000 users on my birthday. which is
Oh,
cool.
wow.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
I remember like refreshing, and I'm like, whoa.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's cool. That's a cool birthday present.
It was super cool.
Yeah.
And yeah, almost every milestone has been eerily around my birthday, actually.
Oh.
It's super weird.
That's
Yeah.
interesting.
But yeah, that
Wait, how many
combined-
birthdays do you have? You just have like one birthday throughout the year, right? You don't
Yeah.
have multiple birthdays?
Just one birthday, yeah. Yeah, but like the big milestones. And we're almost at 6 years now too with Rooted. So yeah, It's been a while.
Gotcha. So a lot of PR, a lot of social media engagement. Would you say that strategy still what you do today? Or would you say like you've added some more things now?
I would say that I added submitting stories to Apple. So like letting them know what update I'm doing, and Google Play.
Okay.
That's something that, just like with press releases, actually, it's very similar. Like I was comparing ASO to SEO. I'd compare submitting a story to Apple and Google to submitting a press release to Reporter,
Right.
because they're getting so many of these stories submitted daily. And they need content though, right? For their calendar. And like, when you open the App Store, there's
Right.
different themes or seasonal events and stuff.
Right.
So I would tie some update in the app to like a global event. So like World Mental Health Day is like an obvious example. So yeah, I would send them notice in advance, like 4 to 6 weeks in advance. I'm not always good at that. Because it's like startup mode. So it's what are we doing in 4 weeks? But now I have like a calendar for the whole year. So it's
Gotcha.
all planned out now. But at the beginning, I was just, trying to just get their attention really. And I got rejected so many times that I almost like gave up. I was like, this is stupid. It doesn't work. Nobody's reading this. I'm putting all this work into it. And then it just goes somewhere and I don't hear back from anyone until the day I did. And they said, hey, submit some artwork, please, because you might be featured.
Cool.
Yeah,
And
that was awesome.
Did that have a big impact on your like downloads and stuff, or?
It did, especially because, again, I was all organic. So like having any sort of bump like that was pretty huge, that I could like track and then see how users interacted with it. I was just like super obsessed with watching all that stuff and like the analytics, and yeah, it did. Once you're featured once, you often continue to be featured.
Right.
So I would still send the stories like monthly again, but we were slowly popping up in more and more collections, which is what they call those groups of app stories in the
Right.
App Store.
Gotcha.
So they'll have like, oh, do you want a calming moment? And then that's the collection of apps underneath that they recommend.
Oh, interesting. Gotcha. So in terms of, I remember you and I were talking about you going to the US and like pitching this to hospitals or something like that.
Health
And
insurance.
Health insurance.
Yeah.
That's right. And then you were saying how don't do business with Canadian companies because it just takes too long. Can you talk to me a little bit about, so that's the B2B side of things,
Yes.
right? Like
Yeah,
when did you decide to
exactly.
get into the B2B side?
Yeah, so not until, fast forward a few years, Rooted has been scientifically validated by a study at the University of Victoria.
Oh, wow.
We're working with so many doctors, like recommend Rooted. We're working with therapists, clinicians. We are popping up in different papers, like articles published, academic pieces where these people are doing basically testing Rooted with other apps and seeing how people are engaging with them and getting positive results. So all this stuff is like validating, and we hit a couple million users.
Yeah.
And yeah, so with all of that, the most common review, if it's negative, if there's no bug, then it's about the fact that there's any paid content at all.
Right.
And so some people, like we were saying, like the panic attacks can be so debilitating that they actually can't be at work, or they
Right.
they don't have income as they're struggling with this, and they're getting a lot of benefit and they are feeling better, but they can't afford it. So I get emails like that, like weekly, from people asking for free subscriptions, which I'm happy to provide. But after a while, I was just like, how can I like work with groups that have the funds to support these people and should be supporting them too? And yeah, just to reach more people. So that's how the B2B idea came along.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
And what's that experience like so far with dealing with B2B? I'm sure that's very different than...
It's so different. Yeah, I mean, because the B2C stuff, I think why I was able to learn it and it felt intuitive was because like I was my own audience.
Yeah.
And I can really relate to the people downloading Rooted. When they leave those reviews, like I feel like I'm in their shoes. Like some people will be very descriptive about what they're struggling with. And I'm like, oh yeah, like, because I've been there and I like can relate to them so well. So I'm able to communicate with the audience and I love it. And I just like, I'm so, just blown away by like the people that use Rooted too. They're very cool. And then on the flip side with the B2B stuff, I'm not a salesperson. So I'm like, I can't really relate to us talking about something that could literally currently be helping people who are struggling, but we're sitting in this boardroom talking about maybe launching it in 6 months. And I just like, that's harder for me to relate to that and the struggles that large organizations go through and how slow they move.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So in terms of, have you signed any contracts right now with B2? Okay. So with the US healthcare, so in terms of, so how does that process work? Like if I can go to my healthcare provider and just be like, hey, I want this reimbursed kind of thing, or?
It depends. Like there's a bunch of different models of how we work with companies, but basically, it depends on the company. Some it's reimbursement, some they just provide the licenses up front. So like you just can have access. Some they want to wait until the doctor lets you know. So you can't just be like, I want this. They're like, the doctor has to let you know that they think you could benefit from it.
So what's the plan? I mean, you're coming up in 6 years. I'm sure you've thought about this quite a bit, or what's the plan? What's the vision for the next 5 to 10 years?
Yeah, well, I would love to hit the 10 million user mark. I think that would be super, super cool. I did like getting the message about Rooted out there still, even though now it's more known and like it's super cool that many people, will just know about it. But it's hard to measure that as much. So like seeing the numbers and the analytics is like a bit easier to like gauge that with. So I'd like to hit that 10 million mark and keep expanding like the languages it's offered in 10 different languages.
Cool.
And reaching people in different places and exploring this B2B stuff until at least next year. Just sort of giving myself a timeline to see like, is this the path that I want moving forward? Or maybe it's like to keep the contracts I have now, of course, that nothing changes there, but then otherwise to focus and keep focusing on the B2C, which would include advertising.
Gotcha. And in terms of revenue, so basically you guys make money off subscription, right? Yeah. So so you offer like monthly as well as yearly. If you buy the yearly, it's cheaper than the monthly. Is that the model?
Yeah, you got it.
Gotcha.
Sure. Yeah.
And when it comes to pricing, how did you determine the pricing? Did you do a lot of A/B testing? Did you look at competitors like Calm and Headspace, or how did that process work?
Yeah, so a bit of all the above. I mean, it's been like almost 6 years now, so I've tested a bunch of different prices. Also just seeing like where users, if they have monthly subscriptions, like when do they churn from that monthly subscription? And then, so I've tried like weekly subscriptions for Android where that's more popular versus iOS. It's not really as popular. I've tried 6 month, 3 month, all sorts.
Yeah. And what's your findings? Like what's
the most popular one is a annual subscription after a 7-day trial. Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah, and with Rooted too, it's a bit funny because there's this idea that you can graduate from Rooted, and I actually like love that. Yeah. So it's just interesting. So getting the annual is good, and then if people like graduate from it, it's also sweet. Yeah.
That's okay. So is that the pricing model you have now?
Yes.
Like, okay, so no more monthly. I can't even subscribe for a month.
You can actually, but that's the one that the app shows you when you first sign up for Rooted, and then it's just like what it recommends, but there's different pricing options if you click different pricing options.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
And
there's lifetime and monthly besides annual.
Understood.
Yeah.
And for apps, how much do App Store take? Like 30% or 20? What's the percentage?
15% up until you make $1 million, and then annually, and then after that it's 30% when you make over $1 million.
Interesting. And then in terms like subscription businesses, obviously like the biggest thing is churn, right? Like you want as many people to keep subscribing to it as possible. But you did bring out the point of like, you know, like you're helping someone to fix their issue. Like hopefully, you know, we don't want you to subscribe for the rest of your life in a way, you know.
In a way.
We wanted to like help you to overcome your whatever you're experiencing.
Exactly.
So in terms of what are some of the lessons you've learned along the journey of actually, you know, not the obvious ones, like obviously have a great product and responding to customers' feedback, and what are some other things that you've learned about the subscription business that maybe are not so obvious?
That aren't obvious. I think hearing from users has always been like a bit surprising, like who's using the app and their reasoning behind what subscription they're getting to. So we'll have some people that had their panic attack for the first time and they bought lifetime on the first day. And then a week later, they're like, hey, I'm feeling better. And so that's interesting. We have others who like buy like family plans for their family. I think, yeah, hearing of individual use cases. So like less of like on a macro level, but just hearing the individual use cases is super interesting. We have people like parents using it with their kids. So the parents will subscribe and like use it with, use Rooted with their kids before they go to bed at night kind of thing. Or people on the flip side, we've had kids buy it for their parents as well, encouraging them to use it. Yeah, we've heard from a senior home where it was like helping the seniors fall asleep at night that were having trouble adjusting to the new home and stuff.
Oh, wow.
So yeah, that's been the most surprising.
What would you say like the number one segment, the power users? Who are those type of people?
Yeah, women more like they're 2.5 times more likely to suffer from panic attacks, and they are those power users for Rooted as well. But men also use it. But yes, the core kind of power users are women.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Gotcha. Cool. No, that's super interesting. Like I told you right off the bat, I've never interviewed anybody who has an app business. And yeah, I do find it quite interesting. So I want to shift the conversation to a little bit about you as an entrepreneur and you as a person. One thing I find quite fascinating is the fact that, and I could be completely wrong by me saying this, by the way, so please correct me. It's like the hustle culture is very much like, all right, let's, we got traction. Let's like hire, let's like grow a team. Let's like, scale, like even if it's at a loss, like we need growth. To me, it seems like, yeah, like, you want to get to 10 million downloads, but it seems like you're more patient. You're trusting the journey. You're having faith that you will get there one day. It doesn't have to be tomorrow. So can you talk to me a little bit about the framework and the mindset you have around this hustle culture versus like, hey, like we'll get there, chill.
Yeah. So I'd say like on an individual on an individual level, I hustled so hard especially those first few, like up until last year, really. I just started doing Rooted full time last year, by the way.
What were you doing before?
I was doing marketing and teaching digital marketing boot camp based on growing Rooted, basically,
Cool.
right? And everything I learned from growing Rooted.
Gotcha.
So, I mean, I just didn't even have evenings or weekends. Like I was constantly working. So it's not like on an individual level, I don't believe in hustle culture. I actually do feel like if you want to make something work, like you do have to, like work-life balance is like questionable.
Yeah.
If you really want to make something work.
Yeah.
But with what you're saying about like headcount equating like the value of a company, I don't believe in that. Yeah, I think you can do so much with so little if you're resourceful, and that's definitely like more my style. I remember when I was first starting and I was so desperately passionate about it, and it was so important for me for people to understand Rooted, to get into the hands of people. And people were like, well, you must not be taking it seriously because you're bootstrapped. And that hurt. Wow. I was like, what do you mean? Like, I'm so serious about this. Like, this is my baby. This is my passion. So that was challenging, especially like I didn't attempt B2B conversations then.
So you could have gone two ways, right? You could have been like, yeah, you're right. Like I could grow this team and I'll do that, versus like, no, like screw off. Like you don't understand. Like, let me just do my thing. How come you didn't go the other way?
Well, quite a few reasons. One being that like Rooted's pretty values based. So the reason why I started it was to actually have that impact, right? And some of my first conversations with investors were just like, there's too much for free. This needs to be changed. This needs to be, I'm like, this is my baby. Like, don't
come
tell me.
Ugly.
Yeah, don't tell me what to do too, And I was like, oh, this is not going to work.
And for someone that wants to start an app, it's like, oh, I have a great idea for an app, right? In terms of development, where's the best place to find developers?
It's a mixed bag, but you can try LinkedIn, groups like Upwork. There's so many different styles of Upwork now, like new companies that have popped up. I think it's quite a competitive space. I think ArcDev was one. I actually joined a bunch of Slack groups. And like, so if there's like a language that the app's in, so let's say like React Native, you can join a React Native Slack group, and there's developers there that are both posting about jobs, and then they also like post in forum, like if they're dealing with a bug, and like support each other that way. There's a number of forums like that. But for as a like non-developer, like just joining the Slack group to meet those people.
Gotcha.
Yeah. That's where my best developers came from, is Slack, actually. Yeah.
So now that you're successful in your field and you have this app that's doing 2 million, has over 2 million downloads, what are some lessons you kind of learned along the way? Like you and I went to Sahil's talk last night, and a lot of people, I think, wait until they reach a certain milestone to feel happiness.
Yeah, I think that's a good point too, and also goes back to like that bootstrapping concept. Like I knew that wouldn't make me happy. I really wanted, like, having a board and investors telling me what to do just would not, just doesn't go with the vibe that is rooted in the first place. And I genuinely want to like figure out how like people say lifestyle business like it's a bad thing because it means you're not growing or venture backed, but I actually think there's nothing wrong with that. Like I think creating a business around your lifestyle could be really healthy. And Sahil last night also talked about a lot of, you can have so much money, but you can be cash rich, he said, but like
emotionally poor
and emotionally poor. And yeah, he was talking about how busy he was. And so like we've heard that story with other people. Like, we have access to books and biographies, and we get to read about these successful people and hear about how miserable they were when they were in certain situations with the business. And often that is, for me anyway, what I've picked up from these books is like around investors and dealing and owing people money and like having that responsibility and needing to 10x something that, you started out and you end up being a founder that was passionate, but then the rest of your job is just like finding money afterwards. And like, I just didn't want any of that. Like I didn't want to have to compromise rooted values too. So yeah, that's something that I'm continuously learning and like feel quite strongly about. And in terms of happiness, every year for my birthday, I set like something that I want to focus on for the whole year.
Oh, cool.
And I did this
year was gambling? No, I'm just kidding. She had a birthday party. She had a birthday party recently with like blackjack tables and stuff like that. So I thought you want to become like a professional gambler now.
For sure. That lifestyle business.
Yeah. So what I'm curious to know. I love that, by the way. I want to do something similar, like every 3 months. I want to try something new. But for you, for 1 year. So what was it last year and what is this year?
It was calmness.
Okay.
And I feel like I nailed it. I'm like, I just feel so much more calm and just chill. And then this year was happiness.
Gotcha.
So I think, you definitely don't have to wait for something to work on it or like for other things to fall into place. Sometimes things do fall into place, but I just, in my experience, that hasn't happened super often and just have to like really focus on it and work for it. And so, choosing to believe that I can be happy and choosing to like focus on things that make me happy and choosing to spend time during the day to do those things. That's important to me this year.
So what are some of the things that makes you happy?
So you mentioned my birthday party. That was just so lovely to see those people and just to feel loved. And, I don't have family here, so it's just really nice to have those people around. And I actually made a point of trying to remember that feeling and feeling the feeling that I felt surrounded by people that cared about me. And to like remember that and feel it since then. I like journaled about it and make a conscious effort to remember it. And running, I love running. I love reading. I love, just spending time with people that I really find interesting. So like the event we went to yesterday, that was so much fun too. So I'm going to reflect on that too. Cool. And like remember that I also felt super happy then, surrounded with friends too.
So how much work do you do per day? Are you like 8 hours a day kind of thing or?
Yeah. And I used to be like 15 or something. Oh, wow. So I'd wake up, work out, have some me time for sure. Like that's been a constant too since I started Rooted, because it's one of the things I learned about anxiety and panic attacks. Is like you do need to give yourself that time and that space. So I have been doing that consistently, but then I would go to work 9 to 5, and then I would come home and work like 5:30 to 7, have dinner, and then work like 8 to midnight. And that was like my schedule for like many, many years.
Yeah.
And working weekends as well. So
Yeah.
I don't think I really still ever have a day where I'm not working. Like I'll still work on the weekends, but I'm just able to find so much more balance and like choose my happiness over like that mentality that I need to 10x this year.
I think your like the relationship with work has changed maybe.
Yeah.
Like before, I can't speak for you, but for myself, I feel like I actually asked my life coach about this the other day. I find it really fascinating. I find human psychology very fascinating because DNA speaking wise, like we're 99.9% the same, you and I. We're like human to human, we're very, very similar. Like we may look different, we might have different past events, but like just physiologically speaking, biologically speaking, we're all the same.
Totally.
But we all think we're so different. We're so unique. We're not, we're all the same. But something I asked them was, because he actually coaches like millionaires and even billionaires from like Silicon Valley. He lives down in SF. So he has some clients that I think like, I'm pretty sure he has some clients. He would never say the names, but based on what I'm hearing, they're like head of Google, head of Facebook, have like crazy companies, tech companies. And I asked him, I'm like, Chad, how many of your clients have had some sort of a past trauma and by experience that trauma made them into the person that they are today? And what I mean by that is they decided in that moment that they want to be successful, monetarily speaking, build something amazing, build something great, making a lot of money, so that's their way of like coping and dealing with that trauma. Like maybe it was like in that moment, I didn't feel like I'm worthy. I didn't feel like I was enough. I didn't feel like I was respected. And they attached money and success with like, hey, once I have this, then I will be successful. And you know what his answer was? 100%. Yeah, he's like every single one of them. Now, having said that, I thought about the question after. I was like, wait, if I go to like a cancer doctor and ask like, how many of your patients have cancer? Obviously, like a lot of them will have cancer. You know what I mean? Because he's known for that. So people that became his client are obviously like. But I did find that interesting because the reason why I asked him is because I had this talk with this other entrepreneurs about this topic. It's like, hey, can we, as entrepreneurs, I feel like for myself, I was running on bad fuel for a long time. And that bad fuel was like, I felt like I wasn't loved. I felt like I wasn't enough. I felt like I was made fun of. I was bullied. And again, for me, it was like, all right, once I become successful, none of those things will happen. So I use all of that as energy towards building my business. And like, it did work. I did get the outcome from a business perspective that I wanted. But what I realized is like, man, running on bad fuel is not good. It's like very unsustainable, especially if you want to be in this game for a long time.
Yeah, for sure. It's like going to the gym and working out just because you want your body to look a certain way versus like because you want to feel good and be like the best that you can be, or like feel your body's potential and stuff. So yeah, it's like it's a source that will like eventually run empty, I think.
Yeah, empty. But at the same time, like I got pretty sick for like a couple of years, and man, like it was, I think the bad fuel, it's very interesting. Like, does it work? Yes. Is it sustainable? I don't think so. For the long term.
A lot of people have that. I haven't personally experienced this one, but like they're motivated because like somebody like of an ex, because of an ex, and they want to make their ex jealous. I was like, oh, that's really interesting. And then they like build real shit from that. But then, I think you do reach a point where that's no longer the fuel, and you need to like find what the fuel is. And I guess my goal is the fuel to remain constant. And it is, if it is that impact, then I kind of look at how I can frame my life around that rather than me chasing something to create that impact. I'm like, I want to live this now versus in 10 years. And that a big part of that is because of, you know, having access to biographies of those successful people and even the people at last night's event, right? They were very open and opening up about their relationship with money and happiness. And it's just like, I see that this framework doesn't work. Like if you're constantly chasing more, then you'll never have enough. So it's like, when is enough? And it's
kind of nice if it did work, because it would be such an easy game to win. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, all right, just make more money and you'll be more happy. And then like money is such a measurable thing. Like, all right, well, let me just start more businesses and I'll be happier. And I think the whole world would be like a peaceful place, but that is not, life is a lot more complicated than that.
Totally. And Andrew yesterday mentioned the book by Felix Dennis. It's like, I Will Teach You to Be Rich.
How to Get Rich. Yeah.
Yeah, so because the other one's Remit. Yeah. It's very similar titles.
Yeah, super similar.
But I remember there was a part there where he talked about how like, I just collect money because it's like getting points. He's like, I don't feel anything, but I collect it and I collect it. And if all of a sudden people were competitive about collecting the most seaweed, he's like, I would collect the most seaweed. So just random. I'm pretty sure he said seaweed. It was something random like that.
Yeah.
And I was like, yeah, like it was just like one thing he kept ticking off, but it wasn't like fueling him or making him happy.
Yeah. I was talking to my friend about this. I was like, man, like I did a lot of self-work over the past couple of years, totally by accident, by the way. I'm not like, if you had met me maybe 4 years ago, you'd be like, dude, this guy needs to chill out. Like he's a little bit too, he's a lot, you know? And I was so hungry. I would even go as far as saying the word desperate for success. I was willing to do anything. You want to cut off my right arms? Just so do it, you know? But through working with my coach and reading books and talking to other entrepreneurs and more importantly, going through what I personally experienced, now I'm in a state where it's like, hey, it's all good. Like it's more chill and like what you said and relaxing. But what's really interesting is now that I want to build some more businesses, it's like I only knew so long how to run on those bad fuels that now I need to find a good fuel to run on. And I haven't really found a good one yet.
Right.
I think. I mean, there's a couple that's like, there, but in terms of, I remember how I used to work before where I was like exactly like you, 15 hours a day. These feel, I don't think I can work 15 hours a day, which is interesting.
Yeah.
And then my friend's like, yeah, like I'm scared to get to that stage because then like, what now? I have nothing.
Exactly. And that's when you talk to a life coach
Yeah,
and try to figure it out. Cause it's not easy too, if you don't feel that fuel. But, I guess, if you're closer to reaching the state of enough, then that's pretty badass and cool.
Yeah. But then here's the thing. It's like, if I have enough, then like, I feel like I don't need to do anything.
Yeah, exactly.
Like,
just lay around all day.
Yeah, I'll lay around all day. I will go play golf. I will like eat dinner. I'll just chill all day. But then
you're right.
Part of me is like, there's something that's missing from that. And I think it's productivity. Like, I think we're all meant to put on this earth to like produce, to grow, I love growth. That's like one of my, I love attending seminars and reading books and listening to podcasts. I just love growth. So, that's really interesting. I want to ask you this, like, kind of one last question. What's like, and to paint some context behind this question, and the question is about, like, what's your inner conflict right now? Like, for me, for example, this is something I just thought of the other day was, like, marketing. So I have a course teaching other people how to sell on Amazon. And I think with marketing, it's so important to show the before state and the after state. And then your product is simply the bridge to help people to go from before to after. Now, if we think about like an Amazon business, right? Like the before state is like the classic, oh, I hate my job, 9 to 5, like, I don't have time with my kids. And the after state is like voila, like sports car, nice house, like you're traveling all the time. But I feel really douchey for like showing all that.
Right.
It's like, oh, like here's my nice car. Like you want to learn how to, but I know that type of advertising will work really, really well.
Right.
So that's one of my like inner conflicts right now. It's like I struggle with it. Yours doesn't have to be business, but I am curious to know like what's like one inner conflict you have right now in your life.
Yeah, I mean, the business related one, I think, is sort of what we talked about with like the monetization. And it's like, there's so many tactics to like increase the monetization. And I'm like, ooh, but which ones do I want to do? Because it's still like rooted as, again, more missions based, right? So it's like, that is always a bit of an inner conflict. And it's also what led me to do the B2B stuff. And then in terms of personal conflict, I think, like you said, we're all like healing these past wounds. And so sometimes I will just feel really immersed in like I lost my mom when I was in my 20s. And so that I just get so immersed in grief. And I just feel like I'm reverted back to like the little child that like just really needs and misses her mom. And so those days are so hard because on paper, I'm doing super well. And then I'll have really horrible days like that. So I guess, I don't know if that counts as like an inner conflict, but it's something that I've been struggling with and like going to keep trying to work on.
Yeah. Well, I'm sorry to hear that. I can't imagine the pain that you go through. Yeah, I think it's so important to just not look at, on paper, like you said, right?
Yeah, exactly.
And,
There's so much more to us. Than,
the name and then the mascot. Maybe you use your own picture now. I'm not too sure.
Yeah,
but,
I do now. Yeah.
But,
it's more effective. In communicating the story.
Yeah. No, absolutely. So, yeah, listen, hey, I know you have a birthday party to go to, but I had a really good time enjoying talking to you about this type of stuff. And I learned a lot about, the app store, the monetization. I loved the fact that you don't do any paid ads, or now you do, but like how you grew this business organically, because that is really a testament to the product itself. Because trust me, Tesla, for example, they don't do any ads.
Right.
Yeah. They're like, we just want people to, and word of mouth is the best form of marketing. And it only works if the product is good.
Exactly.
If the product sucks, you will also get a word of mouth marketing, but it's in it's in the wrong direction.
Exactly.
It's the wrong way. So, and I just really loved our conversation about, just like life of an entrepreneur, just like, you do have to grind, but up to a certain point, it's like, hey, I gotta prioritize happiness as well. And all the other things that is super, super important. So any last words, anywhere like people want to follow you, they want to connect with you, or they want to download the app, and just give people the spiel, just so that maybe there's some female founders that look up to you, so inspirational, and they want to follow you somewhere, or
probably easiest to connect on LinkedIn or Twitter. I think I'm Anya Margaret on Twitter. And then, you can find Rooted in the app stores. If you look up panic attacks, it'll be number 1, panic attack, number 1. And then anxiety, it'll be number 2 or 3, because we're ranking for that now too, which is awesome. And that was many years that it took to get there.
Yeah.
But just that last message of, if you keep waiting to have enough before you start relaxing, then by the time you get there, you might have really missed out on the time you had that you could have been having before. So I'd encourage everyone to just sort of reflect on what that means to them and see if they can incorporate it in their day.
Totally.
Yeah. No. I'm working on it too. I don't have it figured out at all, but I just have found so much value from doing that.
And I think one last thing is even though you said I don't have figured it out, I don't think any of us do.
Yeah.
This life is it's our first time doing it, Yeah,
that's true.
So
first and last time.
Yeah. And I'm sure we'll, screw up along the way.
Yeah.
But I think the important thing is actually having that self-awareness so that when the time does come and you can catch yourself in that moment, it's like another voice, hey, tapping on the shoulder. Hey, Anya, Tom, hey, slow down a bit. Enjoy this moment. Although although it kind of sucks, but this is what matters, because once you do get to the 2 million, 10 million, 5 million app downloads, whatever, that moment in itself, the celebration actually only lasts for a very, very, very short period of time.
Yeah.
You might be yes, 10 million. But then the next tomorrow, it's okay, what now? 20 million, 30 million?
Totally. Yeah. And I would brush off all of the successes along the way too, because it wasn't good enough yet. And I wasn't going to celebrate because it didn't reach enough people yet. And I had all these goals. And now I'm letting myself celebrate a bit more. And just,
totally.
Reflect on it more.
Totally. Yeah. Awesome. All right, guys. Well, hopefully you enjoyed this conversation. Thank you so much. And comment, subscribe, all that type of stuff if you want to. And see you guys in the next episode.
Cheers. Thanks for having me.
Ciao.